My name is Esther Williams, and I was born into chains in the cypress swamps of Louisiana, where the air hangs thick as molasses and the mosquitoes feast on flesh that nobody claims belongs to itself. I am 26 years old this summer of 1851, though I've lived enough lifetimes for 3 women. They call this place Bellefontaine Plantation, a name that means beautiful fountain in the master's fancy French, but there ain't nothing beautiful about it except the lie they tell themselves when they sleep in their cool beds while we sweat through another night in the quarters. I remember my mama's hands. That's what I hold on to when the darkness gets too close. The memory of her fingers, rough as tree bark but gentle, when they braided my hair in the mornings before the bell rang. She used to sing while she worked, low songs that came from someplace older than these cotton fields, older than this country that calls itself free while it drinks our blood like wine. Mama's been gone 7 years now, sold downriver when I was 19, and I still wake some mornings reaching for her in the dark, my hand grasping nothing but the humid air that never cools, never offers mercy. They took her because I wouldn't let the overseer touch me. That's the truth of it, plain and sharp as a knife. Mr. Claiborne, with his red face and whiskey breath, he'd been watching me since I turned 16, his eyes crawling over my body like beetles on rotting fruit. One evening, he cornered me behind the smokehouse, and when his hands reached for my dress, something inside me said no. Not with words, I knew better than that. But my body went rigid as iron, and I looked him straight in the eye with all the fury my mama had taught me to hide. He saw it, that flash of defiance, that moment when I forgot to make myself small. The next morning, Mama was gone, chained to a coffle of souls heading south to the sugar plantations where they work you to death in 5 years or less. That was their first attempt to break my spirit. They wanted me to understand that nothing was mine, not my body, not my mother, not even my grief. They wanted me to learn that resistance had a price, and they would collect it from whatever I loved most. But here's what they didn't understand. When you take everything from a person, you don't make them weak. Sometimes you make them dangerous. I work in the big house now, have for the past 3 years. Mrs. Bellefontaine requested me specifically after her previous lady's maid died of the fever. I iron her silk dresses and arrange her hair in the elaborate styles she copies from magazines that come up from New Orleans. I serve her breakfast in bed and listen to her complain about the heat, about her husband's drinking, about how difficult it is to maintain a proper household when the help is so unreliable. She says help like we chose to be here, like we applied for the position of chattel and got accepted based on our qualifications. Sometimes I stand behind her while she sits at her vanity, and I look at our faces in the mirror, hers pale and powdered, mine the color of wet earth after rain. We're the same age, Mrs. Bellefontaine and I, both born in the spring of 1825. But she's lived 26 years, and I've survived them, and there's a whole ocean of difference between those 2 words. The big house is quieter than the fields, but it ain't safer. Different dangers here, more subtle. In the fields, you know where the threats are coming from. The overseer's whip, the sun's fury, the exhaustion that makes your bones feel like they're turning to dust. In the house, the dangers wear silk and smile while they destroy you. Mrs. Bellefontaine's cruelty is refined, perfumed. When she's displeased, she doesn't yell. She sighs, disappointed, as if my failure to anticipate her every need is a personal betrayal. Then she mentions, casual as discussing the weather, that perhaps I'd be happier in the fields, or that she's heard the overseer needs more hands for the harvest, or that her husband has been considering which slaves might fetch good prices at the next auction. These are the ways they try to break your spirit when beating your body ain't enough. They make you complicit in your own oppression. They make you grateful for the privilege of oppression light. They make you police yourself so thoroughly that they barely have to lift a finger. But I learned something from losing Mama, something they didn't intend to teach me. If everything can be taken, then I got nothing left to lose but myself. And myself is the one thing I will not give them, no matter what they take, no matter what they threaten, no matter how they try to hollow me out and wear my skin like a costume. I got a secret, something I keep folded up tight in the deepest part of my heart where they can't reach it. I can read. Taught myself from Mrs. Belfountain's books when she leaves them lying around. Taught myself from the newspapers Master reads at breakfast, from the letters that come for him from his brother in Virginia. I pieced together words like quilting scraps, and slowly, I've stitched myself an education they would kill me for having. Because words are power, and they want us powerless. Words are freedom, and they want us in chains. Words are proof that we're human, and their whole world depends on believing we're not. The summer I turned 23, they brought in a new overseer named Gideon Marsh. The old one, Claiborne, had finally drunk himself to death, his liver giving out like a rotten fence post. I won't say I mourned him. Some deaths feel like justice, even if they come too late and too easy. Marsh was different, younger, harder, with eyes like dirty ice and a meanness that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than whiskey or heat or the casual brutality this place breeds in white men like fungus on dead wood. He'd come from Mississippi, where the plantations were bigger and the treatment was worse, and he brought his methods with him like a disease. He started with the field hands, implementing a new quota system that meant faster picking, longer hours, less rest. People started dropping in the heat, their bodies simply giving up the ghost. Old Jacob collapsed one afternoon and never woke up. Sarah miscarried her baby in the third row of cotton, bleeding out while the sun beat down like a punishment from God. Marsh's response was to increase the quotas again. Weakness would not be tolerated. Inefficiency would be corrected with the lash. But it was what he did to the women that showed his true nature. He had a special interest in causing shame, in violating not just bodies but souls. He would summon women to the overseer's cabin at night, young ones mostly, but sometimes married women, sometimes mothers, and what happened, there was a wound that never healed right, a breaking that went deeper than bones. I knew it was only a matter of time before he called for me. I could feel his attention like a hand around my throat, squeezing tighter every day. He would watch me when I walked from the big house to the quarters, his gaze heavy with intention. He would find excuses to be near me, to speak to me, to let me know that he was thinking about me, planning for me. Mrs. Belfountain noticed too, though she pretended not to. That's the bargain white women make in this world. They trade their voices for their comfort, their conscience for their position. They see what their men do to us, and they look away, and they convince themselves that we somehow deserve it, or want it, or that it's simply the natural order of things. Better us than them, I suppose. Better our bodies than theirs. Better our children sold away than their precious sons and daughters scattered to the winds. One evening in late August, as I was helping Mrs. prepare for bed, she said to me, almost casual, "Esther, Mr. Marsh tells me you've been shirking your duties in the quarters. He says you've been setting a bad example for the other girls, acting above your station." I kept my face blank, my hands steady as I unbuttoned her dress.
"No, ma'am.
I keep to my work and my own business." "Well, he seems to think you need correction. He's requested permission to handle your discipline personally." She watched me in the mirror, searching my face for reaction. "Of course," I told him, "that you're my personal maid, and any discipline would come through me first. "But Esther," and here her voice dropped, took on an edge of something that might have been warning or might have been threat. "You need to be more careful. You need to understand your place. This stubbornness of yours, this pride, it's going to get you into trouble that even I can't protect you from." Protection. As if her ownership of me was some kind of shelter instead of the very thing I needed protection from. As if her keeping me in the house was mercy instead of just a different kind of prison. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my narrow bed in the small room off the kitchen where the house slaves slept, listening to the cicadas scream in the darkness, listening to the whispers of the others settling in for a few hours of rest before dawn came again. I thought about Mama, wondered if she was still alive, wondered if she was thinking about me too, wherever she was in this vast and terrible country that ground us up like cane in a mill. I thought about Marsh and what was coming. I thought about all the women who'd had their spirits broken, who'd learned to survive by becoming less than themselves, by carving out the parts of themselves that felt and thought and hoped, and leaving only the shell that could endure. I understood why they did it. I didn't judge them for it. Sometimes surviving is the only victory we're allowed, and it takes its own kind of courage to live when everything inside you wants to die. But I also knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't let them hollow me out. I couldn't become nothing just to survive as nothing. There had to be something worth preserving, some core of self that remained untouched no matter what they did to the outside. Because if I lost that, if I let them take that, then they would have succeeded. I would be broken, not just in body but in spirit, and that would be worse than death. That would be erasure. I started planning, not escape. I wasn't fool enough to think I could run. Not from Louisiana, not without help, not without resources I didn't have. But I started thinking about resistance, about the small ways I could refuse even when refusal seemed impossible. The night came, inevitable as winter. Marsh sent word through one of the field hands that I was to report to his cabin after the big house settled down for the night. The message was phrased as a request, but we all knew what it was. Commands don't ask permission. I finished my duties with Mrs. Spellfountain, brushed out her hair, turned down her bed, set out her clothes for the next day. She didn't mention the summons, didn't acknowledge what we both knew was about to happen. She simply dismissed me with a wave of her hand, already reaching for the novel on her nightstand, ready to lose herself in some romantic story about people who had the luxury of choice. I walked across the yard toward the overseer's cabin, my heart beating so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. The stars were out, brilliant and indifferent, same stars that had watched over 1,000,000 horrors and would watch over 1,000,000 more. The night was full of sounds, frogs, crickets, the distant bark of a dog, the whisper of wind through the willows that grew near the swamp. Beautiful, all of it. The world was so beautiful, and that made the ugliness worse somehow, made it more obscene. But instead of going to Marsh's cabin, I turned. I walked past it, toward the slave cemetery where we buried our dead without markers, where the earth was soft with bones and sorrow. I walked until I reached the edge, where the neat rows of the plantation gave way to the wild chaos of the swamp, and then I stopped. I stopped, and I made a choice. I chose to wait there, in that liminal space between the world they'd made and the world that existed before them and would exist after them. I chose not to go to him. I chose to make him come find me if he wanted to punish me for it. I chose to take that one small piece of control over my own body, my own movements, my own fate. It was a foolish choice, probably. A dangerous choice, certainly. But it was mine. And in that moment, making a choice, any choice that came from my own will rather than his felt more important than safety, more important than survival. I stood there for an hour, maybe more. The moon rose higher, casting silver light across the water, making the Spanish moss look like ghosts in the trees. I thought about Mama again, about the strength she'd shown me, about the songs she'd sung that carried hidden messages about freedom and resistance and keeping your soul intact even when they owned your body. I thought about all the women who'd come before me, all the way back to Africa, all the way back to the beginning of this nightmare. I thought about their courage, their endurance, their refusal to be completely erased. And I realized something. They wanted to break my spirit because they feared it. They feared what we might become if we ever fully understood our own power, our own worth, our own humanity. They feared that we might look at them one day and see them clearly, not as masters, not as superiors, not as anything divinely ordained, but as ordinary men made monstrous by their own choices, propped up by a system that required our degradation to function. That fear was power. My defiance, however small, however ultimately futile, was power. And they could beat me, sell me, kill me even, but they couldn't take that knowledge away from me. I knew the truth now. I saw through the lies they told to justify themselves. And once you see truth, you can't unsee it. Eventually, I heard footsteps. Heavy boots on packed earth, moving fast and angry. Marsh had discovered I hadn't come, and he was coming to collect what he thought he was owed. I turned to face him, my back to the swamp, my face to the plantation, and I did something I'd never done before in my life. I looked at a white man directly, without lowering my gaze, without making myself small, without showing the deference that was supposed to be instinctive. I looked at him like an equal, like a human being looking at another human being. And I said, clear and steady, no. Just that one word, the most dangerous word a slave could speak. The word that meant everything they'd built was a lie.
No. Marsh hit me. Of course he did.
The back of his hand across my face, hard enough to split my lip, to send me stumbling. I tasted blood, copper, and salt, and something in me sang with triumph because I'd made him reveal himself, made him show the violence that was always just beneath the surface, always ready. You forget yourself, he snarled, and his hand went to his belt, to the whip he kept coiled there like a snake. I'll teach you your place. But before he could draw it, a voice cut through the darkness. Mr. Marsh. We both turned. Master Bellefontaine stood there, holding a lantern, his face unreadable in the shifting light. He'd been out checking on a mare that was about to foal, and he'd seen us, heard us. Sir, Marsh said, his voice changing, becoming deferential in a way it never was with us. This girl refused a direct order. She needs correction. Master Bellefontaine looked at me, and I looked back at him with that same steady gaze I'd given Marsh, that same refusal to make myself invisible. I was past caring what happened next. I'd already made my stand. If this was where I died, at least I'd die as myself. Something flickered across Master's face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Like he was seeing me for the first time as something other than property. It didn't last long, that flicker, but it was there. That girl is my wife's personal maid, he said finally. Any discipline goes through the house, not through you. You overstep your authority, Mr. Marsh. Marsh's face flushed dark, his jaw clenching. With respect, sir, if we don't maintain firm control. I said she's my wife's concern, not yours. Let it go. Master turned to me. Esther, get back to the quarters. I'll speak with Mrs. about this in the morning. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt grateful. But all I felt was a cold clarity. Master hadn't intervened because he thought what Marsh was doing was wrong. He'd intervened because Marsh had violated the property hierarchy, had tried to take something that belonged to the house without permission. It wasn't about my humanity. It was about his ownership rights. Still, I took the reprieve. I nodded once, not bowing, not thanking him, and walked away from both of them with my head up and my back straight. The whispers started the next day. Word spread through the quarters about what I'd done, about how I'd refused, about how I'd stood my ground. Some people looked at me with fear, worried that my defiance would bring down punishment on all of us. They weren't wrong to worry. Collective punishment was one of the favorite tools of control, making us police each other, making us afraid of anyone who stepped out of line. But others looked at me with something different.
Hope, maybe.
Or recognition. Like I'd spoken something out loud that they'd all been thinking in silence. Mrs. Bellefontaine called me to her room that morning, and I expected fury. Expected to be sent to the fields or sold away or whipped in the yard as an example. But instead, she just looked at me for a long moment, her face pale and pinched. You're foolish, she said finally. You're going to get yourself killed, and it won't mean anything. It won't change anything. Maybe not, I said, but I'll know I didn't surrender. Surrender? She laughed bitter. Esther, you're a slave. You surrendered the day you were born. We all surrender, one way or another. The only question is how much of ourselves we sacrifice to survive. I saw it then, the chains she wore that were invisible, but just as binding as mine. The chains of being a woman in a world made by and for men. The chains of a system that gave her comfort in exchange for her complicity, the chains of knowing what was happening all around her and having to pretend she didn't see it. I'm sorry for you, ma'am, I said, and I meant it. I'm sorry you believe that. She slapped me then, a sharp crack across the same cheek Marsh had struck. But her hand was shaking, and I could see tears in her eyes, and I knew I'd hit something true. Get out, she whispered. Get out before I do something we'll both regret. I left, and I returned to my duties, and the days continued. But something had shifted. I'd drawn a line, and everyone knew it. Marsh watched me constantly now, waiting for another opportunity, another excuse. But I was careful, moving through my work with precision, giving him no opening. And at night, in the quiet hours when the house slept, I continued to teach myself. I read everything I could find, memorizing passages, swallowing down knowledge like food for a journey I might never take. I read about the North, about abolitionists, about slaves who'd run and made it to freedom. I read about Haiti, about the revolution there, about enslaved people who'd risen up and won. I read about Denmark VC, about Nat Turner, about all the rebellions that had been crushed but had happened anyway, proving that resistance was possible, proving that we weren't naturally docile, weren't content with our chains. I wasn't planning to run. Not yet, maybe not ever. But I was planning to live, really live, with full knowledge of myself and my world. I was planning to be human, completely and defiantly human, no matter what they did to try to stop me. 3 years have passed since that night at the edge of the swamp. I'm still here at Bellefontaine, still working in the big house, still navigating the razor's edge between survival and selfhood. Marsh is still the overseer, though he keeps his distance from me now, his hatred expressed through petty cruelties and constant surveillance rather than direct confrontation. Master Belfountain watches me sometimes with a strange expression, like I'm a puzzle he can't quite solve. And Mrs. Belfountain treats me with a cold formality that's somehow worse than her previous casual cruelty, like my moment of honesty with her was an unforgivable transgression. But I'm still here, still whole in the ways that matter, still unbroken. I've learned to measure victory differently now. It's not escape, not yet, though I haven't given up on that dream. It's not even freedom, not the legal kind. Victory is waking up each morning and choosing to remember who I am. Victory is teaching another young girl in the quarters how to read using scratches in the dirt. Victory is singing mama songs and knowing that something of her survives in me, in my voice, in the stories I'll pass down if I ever have the chance. Victory is knowing that they wanted to break my spirit, and they failed. They can own my labor, they can restrict my movements, they can punish my body. But my spirit, the essential me, the core of consciousness and will that makes me human, that remains my own. They wanted me to internalize their lie, to believe that I was less than human, that I deserved this life, that resistance was futile and acceptance was wisdom. They wanted me to break myself, so they wouldn't have to keep breaking me. But I refused. I refuse still, every single day, in ways large and small, in the way I think about myself when no one's watching, in the way I help others when I can, in the way I hold on to hope even when hope seems like the cruelest joke of all. Last week, something happened that felt like a sign. A traveling preacher came through, white, but one of those rare ones who seem to actually believe that God didn't make some people to be property of others. He preached in the white church on Sunday, but his words somehow found their way to us in the quarters, passed along by the house slaves who'd heard him speak about justice and mercy and the brotherhood of all souls. Every human being has a spark of the divine, he'd said. Every single one, regardless of their station or their color. And that spark cannot be extinguished by any earthly power. It burns eternal, it burns free, and it will light the way to a better world. When I heard those words, third hand and whispered, I felt something break open in my chest. Not breaking like they wanted, but breaking like dawn breaks, sudden, illuminating, full of possibility, because that's what I'd been holding on to all along without having the words for it. That spark, that light, that essential humanity that no amount of brutality could destroy unless I let it. I don't know what the future holds. I might die here. I might grow old here. I might never see the freedom I dream about. The peculiar institution, as they call it with such delicate language, might outlast me. But I know this. I will not die broken. I will not live broken. I will carry my spark, my light, my spirit through whatever comes, and I will pass it on to whoever needs it, whoever can use it to kindle their own fire of resistance and hope. They wanted to break my spirit because they knew, on some level they couldn't consciously admit, that our spirits were the only thing standing between them and the recognition of their own monstrousness. As long as we remained fully human in our own understanding, their justifications crumbled. As long as we refused to be the things they called us, chattel, property, less than, their entire world revealed itself as the obscene fiction it was. So I keep my spirit intact as an act of rebellion, as an act of truth-telling, as an act of faith in a future I might never see, but that I choose to believe in anyway. I am Esther Williams of Louisiana, and I was born into chains, but not into acceptance. I was born into oppression, but not into surrender. I was born into a world that tried to unmake me before I even had a chance to know myself. But I found myself anyway, in the spaces between their watching, in the silence of my own thoughts, in the memories of my mother's hands and the promise I made to her ghost that I would not forget, would not yield, would not let them win. They wanted to break my spirit. They failed. And in that failure lies every freedom that matters, every victory worth claiming, every truth that will outlast their lies. I am unbroken. I am unbreakable. I am human, entirely and defiantly human, and no one can take that from me unless I give it away. And I never will. I am the keeper of my own soul, and they cannot own what they cannot reach.